What's going on, my damn people? Today, I'm excited to be joined by the brilliant, insightful Kristin Burke, who's going to share with us key insights on what advisors can do to grow themselves, not lose their mind as they're going through crazy growth, how to integrate their professional and personal life, and really some key thoughts around mindset, around practice management, around structuring your time in order to maximize your growth. So, Kristin, welcome to the Damn Live podcast.
Eric, thank you so much for having me.
Hey, I'm excited to have you. So, maybe you give everybody a little background. How did you start in this profession that's called financial services, financial advice, wealth management? It has so many damn monikers, but how did you get into the biz?
Yeah, Eric, that's a really great question. So I started in the financial services industry as a marketing and PR intern way back in 2005. And so I wasn't really looking for a specific internship experience in the industry. I got called, my resume was posted on a campus job board, went in for the interview and really fell in love with the growth and development aspect of the industry. And I turned that internship into a career that spanned over a decade. I had a heavy focus in leadership in my financial services career. I did a lot of work around developing advisors, coaching advisors. I first started coaching advisors back in 2009, training, recruiting, built even an internship program with a Fortune 100 firm. And then ultimately in 2019, I decided I wanted to take my experience and expertise and start my own coaching practice.
I love it. So for those of you out there, what Fortune 100 company are we speaking about? Because we may have listeners from those Fortune 100 company on this live podcast.
Yeah, that's a great question. And I know you've had a guest from this company in the past and maybe even a few guests, but I spent a long time working with Northwestern Mutual.
Shout out to the Northwestern Mutual folks out there. Some of the sharpest financial planners that I've ever come across in my 20 years. So kudos to you, Kristin, for teaching them. So you started out in the business, not necessarily as a coach, but curious and studying success. I'm assuming just like myself, where why do some advisors succeed and some don't? Why do some grow quicker than others? So as you think about, advisors, so why do some advisors come out of the gate running? And why do some advisors struggle from your experience?
Eric, from my experience having now hundreds, probably thousands of coaching conversations with advisors, I think it can be boiled down to 4 characteristics. So I've identified 4 characteristics of goal achievers. First, clarity. Advisors who come out of the gate really strong or they build really great practices, they have an extreme amount of clarity. They know what they want and they know why they want it. Second is confidence. And confidence on the goal achievement journey is when who you think you are aligns with action in the direction of your goals. And that's the key word there that I want to focus on, action. So many advisors wait until they feel confident before they call their top prospect or before they ask for more referrals or they charge that higher fee. And that waiting is what is really detrimental in hurting their practices because our confidence is actually built when we take that action. Third is courage. So courage on the goal achievement journey is when you embrace discomfort to grow in the direction of your goals. I think there are so many advisors out there who are comfortable being comfortable and they need that willingness to walk into the unknown. But in order to grow that courage, we have to face a lot of fears and there's all the head trash and the mindset pieces that play into it. And then the fourth characteristic is consistency. And consistency is when we repeat the actions, the habits, and the beliefs that actually lead to goal achievement. And I think a lot of advisors have starts and stops. They start doing something really, really well and it works, and then they stop. Or they might get some bad news, and so they stop and they get all emotional. But that consistency is when you get back at it and you keep doing the activity or you keep implementing the initiative. That's what's going to help you grow a really successful practice and achieve your goals.
Man, there was so much in there. Like as you were going, my brain was just spinning through like nuggets of what you were saying, specifically around confidence, right? And I think what most advisors get wrong when they think about confidence is that as one of your C's is they think confidence comes from competence, right? So
Right.
do you know the subject matter? And like, I think what most people get wrong about our industry is they think that they're in financial services. And I've always said that we're in the learning and service business. We learn complex things about money, about finances, about taxes, estate planning, insurances, whatever. And then we provide that advice, that insight to people in easy to understand, digestible pieces of information so it leads them to take action. And then we service them better than anybody else in the world, right? So it's not financial services, it's learning and service. You're learning things. So I think
Sure.
for the advisors that are listening to this that are newer, and I'm going to say newer is under 7 years, because about 5 years in the financial game, you know a little. About 7, you know a little bit more than a little, and once you get past 10, you might get close to being
Yeah.
pretty dang good understanding of the domain. The other thing that you said was around consistency. Can you break that down? When you talk about consistency, how did you see that play out in successful advisors in how they manage time, how they drove whatever their key activities were, etc.?
Well, what I think is so fascinating about working with advisors is a lot of advisors' goals can really be backed into by understanding activity and ratios. And so at the end of the day, advisors need to get some sort of a referral or a lead coming in. They need to have some sort of a conversation with a potential client. And if they do enough of those activities, it's going to help them achieve their goals. Now, whatever their goals are, they can figure out based on their own ratios or their activity models what it is they need to do from a specific standpoint. But what I see happen is that advisors don't often have a plan to stay consistent with that activity. So a couple things will get in their way. One, they'll ramp up and do a bunch of activity because they're really excited at the start of a new year. And then their systems aren't built and everything kind of falls apart. So instead of then continuing to get referrals and continuing to see new people, they're spending all this time doing paperwork and admin and some of the serving that you mentioned. So there's the systems piece that comes into play. The other is the emotional element or the mindset element that comes into play. And so a lot of these activities are going to require taking risk, opening yourself up to potential rejection. And if you don't have a strong mindset, when you get told no, or when something, falls off the books, or you don't get the introductions you were expecting, you crumble instead of, okay, I just got to move on to the next and move on to the next. And so I think the systems and the mindset really will impact consistency.
Yeah, it's interesting when you talk about mindset specifically. I think this is one of the professions where your level of success, and getting leads and getting new clients and doing new business in the early stages, right? While you're still trying to grow your practice to a level where you can, support yourself and have an income to be able to be self-sufficient. I think it's one of these things where it can start to play on your self-worth, where you think that your value as a human being is tied to whether or not somebody says yes or no to your offer to help them with their financial picture or their finances, when in reality, there needs to be a certain level of removal, right? And I think this comes back to belief, like you were saying. If you believe in what in the value that you bring and what you do and how it positively impacts people, there's a saying that says your level of persistence, what we're going to call it consistency for you to line up with your C's, your level of consistency is a direct correlation to your belief in yourself, right? And so it's really, really, really interesting, to hear you talk about these things. What other key insights would you think that are important that kind of play into what I was saying?
Yeah, well, it reminds me of a former managing partner that I worked with. He used to have a saying, the one with the greatest conviction always wins. And so when we think about those advisors that are really successful and they're building great practices, they're highly convicted. And conviction can show up in a lot of different ways. Conviction can show up in the level of education. So that are they going on and pursuing those advanced designations so they can serve their clients at a higher level? Conviction shows up and come into meetings prepared with an agenda, knowing what you're going to talk about, being confident, knowing the next steps, asking for that next meeting, asking for the business. And then conviction also shows up in being able to articulate and describe who it is that you serve. And so I think going back to clarity, right? One of the characteristics of goal achievers, the clearer you are on the value that you bring to the clients, why you're doing the work it is that you're doing, and what clients are going to get, how they're going to benefit by sitting down and meeting with you, the more conviction you're going to have.
I think some of the key things that you said in there are about don't wing it, financial advisors. Please, there is no autopilot. There is no cruise control to success in this industry. And if somebody told you that, they're lying to you. The reality of it is that you either go through life being intentional, or having a dialed in level of clarity, or if you try to go about this casually, you'll end up a casualty, right? And the reality of it is, I think what you just said is there's work that comes with knowing who it is you serve, knowing how you serve them. And I think one of the things that you said was, and the way I interpret it was, we have to lead our clients as advisors, meaning they don't know what we're supposed to do, right? So we have to lead them. Hey, we met with you and you said that you wanted X. Here's what we can do about that, and here's how to make that happen. And I think sometimes we think, oh, I'm just going to tell this person whatever we're going to tell them, and they're going to say, yes, I want to do that. And we're just waiting for them to take the action. But I think that's a failure of leadership. I think the advisor has to be constantly thinking about what is the next best thing that we should be doing right now to move you towards financial independence or peace of mind, or you're bettering your situation. It's kind of like going to the gym, right? The first step is setting your clothes out the night before, and the next step is moving your phone away from the bed or your alarm clock so you got to get out of bed. Then the next step is getting going and never stopping and never getting back in the bed. Then it's getting into the gym. Then the next step after that is eating a healthy meal and drinking water, right? So there's all these things. And I'm assuming that that's been your experience in watching successful advisors.
Absolutely. Successful advisors can clearly articulate their process. So, Eric, they know what they're going to say to book a meeting and why they're going to say it. They know what the agenda is for that very first time they're sitting down with a potential client. They know the questions that they're asking, why they're asking them. They then know what prep work is going to go into the plans or the recommendations after that call. They know what they're going to present. Then they know if the client says yes, what's going to happen. And the next level, depending on where an advisor is in his or her practice, is they know who on the team is handling what, and they're able to tee that up with the client. So everything is really dialed in. It's not left to chance.
Yeah, I love that. So in all of your coaching that you've done with advisors over the years, can you give examples of people that got it right? And then people who, we all encounter them, people that are not coachable or teachable and ended up getting it wrong, right? I mean, that's the reality.
Sure.
Are we moldable and adaptable? So can you can you give a few examples of some folks that you had and where they were and where you helped them go to, and then some of the key things you did along the way with them to help point them in the right direction and move them towards their goal?
Yeah. Well, let's talk about one of your past guests. So I believe you interviewed Patrick Scott on the show a couple weeks ago, maybe a couple months ago. Does that sound familiar?
Love Patrick Scott.
Me too.
He's a GOAT.
Me too. So Patrick is one of my clients, and what I love about being able to work with Patrick, and he is absolutely someone who gets it right. He gets it right for so many reasons. One, Eric, he is so dialed in on his education. I think he has every designation, possible. So he has truly committed to financial advising as his profession, as a practice. He's taking it extremely seriously. He's also done a really good job of investing in both himself and his team. So he's a big believer in making that investment and making that investment early and often and growing himself and both growing his team. But I've seen him do a lot of work on growing himself as a leader so he can grow his team. And I've also seen him do a lot of work on visioning, Eric. And this is where I think some of the best advisors get it really right, is they're able to think really, really big. And that's where someone like myself can come in and help. I can help them start to execute on that vision. So a lot of advisors can be really, really visionary, but then they need some help on putting that vision into play and executing on that vision.
I love that. So what are some of the things when you think about laying out a vision, right? Mm-hmm. Something that doesn't push you, but it pulls you towards it, right? What does that look like in its simplest form for those of you that are thinking, oh, okay, I'm sitting here and I want to be successful like the great Patrick Scott. Where does it start? Mm-hmm. And then where do you build the consistency?
So I love that. We're going to talk about vision because it's really important, but I want to encourage everyone to think about their personal definition of success. So I think you have to answer, what does success mean to me and why do I want to be like that? So if someone's like saying, hey, I want to be successful like Patrick, well, why? What is it about what Patrick has done that you find really exciting and that you want to mimic? So I think we need to get really clear. I'm going back to that clarity piece again on what success means and why you want it. But Eric, as it relates to vision, there are some roadblocks that come up that will keep us from visioning. And so I've often heard people say things such as, I can't see that far into the future, or I don't know what it is that I want, or what if what I write doesn't come true? And we can allow these roadblocks to get in our way. And I think the first thing we have to recognize is it fear that starts popping up? Because fear loves to keep us stuck. It loves to keep us comfortable again. And so one, just start to recognize that when you start thinking about vision, some of this might come up for you, and that's really natural. And a lot of times too with vision, people get too hung up on it being a certain format or a certain length of time. Like, that does not matter. What your vision is supposed to do is serve as a foundational roadmap to guide you on your goal setting and help you see where it is that you want to take your practice, take your career. So I would encourage you that if you're thinking about writing a vision for your practice, I would ask you to sit down, very simply set a timer for 15 minutes and just write. Don't worry about time frame. Don't worry about format, and just write and see what pours out of your heart. I think you're going to be really surprised that you actually have a way greater idea of what it is that you want. You just probably haven't taken the time to articulate it. Then you can always go back and you can revise, you can update, you can edit. But I think a lot of times people get too hung up on figuring out the how when they're visioning. And when you're visioning, that's not about figuring out the how. It's figuring out what it is you want, what your life feels like, what your practice feels like, the type of clients that you're serving. It's really those big picture thoughts and feelings. And then once you have your vision in place, then you can work on figuring out the how as you set your goals each year to work towards that vision.
I love that. I love fear. When you said fear, right, start thinking about the acronym, which is fear. Everything depends on your frame of reference. Fear could be forget everything and run, or it could be face everything and rise, right?
Sure.
And to me, or it could be false evidence appearing real, right? These are the different ways of looking at the word fear. And I often find, right, people, like you said, don't give themselves permission to say these things, because the second that they do them, the second that they articulate them, they write them, and oh my God, forget it if they tell somebody. That's even
Oh,
worse.
sure.
You know, if I wrote them down, somebody might see that in my journal, my
Right.
memo pad. But man, if I tell somebody, I think there's this how. How are you going to do it,
Mm-hmm.
right? Because I come to you and say, you know what, Kristen, I think I'm going to run a marathon. You're like, most people who aren't you are like, well, how are you going to do it,
Mm-hmm.
right? And the thing about it is that the how doesn't matter. It's
Correct.
just that you align yourself to what you want, and then you start having a conversation to yourself that goes like this. It could start with, what is it that I need to do this week in order to move me towards that goal, right? Then it can
Mm-hmm.
become, what is it I need to do today to move me towards my vision? What is it that I need to do this hour? What does I need to do this minute? I don't know about you, but I suffer from one of these D's, right? We have all these labels now, okay? When I was a kid, you were just a hyper kid, okay?
Sure.
Now I suffer from one of these D's, ADHD, ADD, whatever D you want to call it, right? And from my perspective, I have to have a conversation with myself that goes like this. Is what I'm doing right now the most important thing I need to be doing to move me towards the direction that I'm trying to take my life? And if the answer is no, it's the quickest thing to reorient myself. Okay, good. Right? And then these are the types of questions I think advisors need to be asking, because when we talk about visioning, there's writing it, and then there's, okay, well, great. Well, how does that translate into what I do every day, every week, every
Sure.
month? So once you cast a vision, how do you then, Kristen, break it down into a time frame, right?
Yeah, that's such a
And
great
then the
question.
action steps.
Well, and Eric, I'm so glad you point out the distractions that can come up. Even just today, I was working on a meeting. I was prepping for a meeting I have tomorrow, and it was taking my computer a while to open the document. And I found myself grabbing my cell phone and clicking on social media and scrolling social media. And after being on there a couple minutes, I had to coach myself and be like, what are you doing? This is not helping you get ready for your meeting or move your business forward. And I had to put it down. And so I think that if we're not intentional, it's going back to that intentional word, then we can allow these distractions to totally detract from what it is that we want to build. So let me answer your question specifically about vision. So you have a long-term vision. Now, my recommendation is that you use that long-term vision to set really meaningful goals for the new year. See, this is where I think some people get it wrong, is they just start to set their goals for their practice, their revenue goal or their growth goal or their education goal, whatever it is, without connecting it to that bigger picture vision. But if you have an idea of where you want to go in a few years, 3 years, 5 years, 7, whatever time frame is right for you, you can then use that vision to be very intentional with this year's goals. And then once you set this year's goals, you need to do a quarterly review where you're checking back in on that vision, you're reviewing your progress towards your goals, and then you look at them every month and you're looking at your goals and how am I progressing? And if you start to use that framework, you're going to have a much greater chance of moving in the direction of your vision.
So talking about goals, right? And specifically with the alignment with your vision,
Mm-hmm.
do you have a process for setting goals, that at least short-term goals, that are congruent with the long-term vision? And do you have a process for when folks that are listening to this, and we all have lots of goals, right? There's
Yeah.
professional goals, which is what we're all here talking about in this podcast, but maybe there's personal goals, there's family goals, right? And sometimes goals can be out of alignment, right? You may have one goal over here and this side of your life, and you have this goal going on in your professional side of life, and they could not be congruent and in alignment. So what's your process when you're working with clients to make sure that they're balancing these things? and setting congruent goals with the vision?
Such a great question, because you're right, Eric. If our goals are competing, it's going to make it really challenging to achieve those goals, right? They're in conflict with one another. So I actually take my clients through what I call my effective goal setting process. So it includes 4 elements: visioning, reflecting, brainstorming, and planning. So we've already talked a little bit about visioning, so I won't be repetitive there. But the next part is reflection. And this is where we need to take the time to pause and really understand our goal setting behaviors and tendencies. And so I think a lot of times what people do is they set a goal, they don't hit it, so they set it as a goal for the next year. And it's like, well, why? Why is that goal still important to you? And what are you going to do differently to achieve that goal in the new year? And so I think we sometimes get on autopilot with goals. We see other people achieving things and we think, ooh, that's my goal. I want to build that kind of practice. But we really need to take ourselves through a very thorough reflection process to understand more about what we want and why we want it. And then that's going to help us brainstorm our goals, because as you mentioned, there's no shortage of goals we can set. We can have multiple goals related to our professional goals and how we want to grow our practices and what our team looks like and the clients we serve. But we also have our personal goals, and we have health goals and family goals. And so if you give yourself the space to brainstorm all the potential goals that feel exciting to you and what I call the different pillars of your life, you can then narrow them down to the goals that are going to be the most meaningful. And I think all of us are going to define meaningful in a different way, but you can start to think about, what are the goals that I can achieve that are going to move me closer to my vision? Because I might have a goal to learn how to play guitar, but that is not at all connected to my vision. If I don't, have a desire to be some incredible, guitar artist, maybe that's a fun outlet, but maybe that shouldn't be my top personal goal, right? If it's not connected to my vision. And then after you go through that brainstorming and you really narrow your goals down to the most meaningful, then you got to create a plan for your goal. And this, Eric, is a place where I see a lot of advisors fall short. Is they're like, hey, I set my goals for the year, but they don't have a plan. So they might think that, I know the activity I need to do, but that's still not a full plan. Knowing that you need to do a certain amount of activity is great. It helps give you some clarity. But what are you going to do to get that level of activity? I don't think advisors are taking the time to think about the strategies they actually need to execute to make their goals a reality. And if you and I are honest, we often know what those goals are. So I'll go back to your example. You want to run a marathon. I've run 8 marathons in my life, so I know a little bit about what it takes to run a marathon. But I can tell you, you're going to need to put some miles in. And that's the thing that a lot of people don't want to do. They don't want to wake up on a Saturday morning and do an 18 or 20 mile training run. So what's your strategy? You know what I did? I joined a running group. So that way I had that level of accountability and I had people to show up and run with. And so I think we need to take that extra step and create the plan so we can bring our goals to reality.
I love that. I think there was so much insights in there. So when you're visiting with advisors and they don't hit their goals, what are some of the key things that you ask them when they go through a reflection process? Because it's, we're getting here towards the tail end of 2024.
Yeah.
Folks are listening to this right now, and some of you may be on track for your goals. You may be off track. You might not even know where the track is, and somebody needs to shine a light. So for those of these people that are off track or looking for the track, Kristin,
sure,
what sort of reflective process should they be going through and thinking about right now so that they don't repeat that in 2025?
I love that you asked that question. And so, yes, first of all, we do have to track. So I'm glad that you bring that up. So if you're not currently tracking your goals, I would highly encourage you to simply write down, what was the goal you wanted to achieve at the beginning of the year? Where are you at? What do you have left to go? And then what are a couple of things you want to do in the next few months to get there? But I think that some reflection questions that would be really helpful for our listeners is, one, go through a SWOT analysis. Now, if anyone has studied business, you've probably heard of a SWOT analysis. The difference is, I once heard a consultant say, you cannot solve for a weakness, but you can solve for a problem. So when you think about doing a SWOT analysis for your practice, you want to identify strengths, you want to identify problems, and problems tend to be internal. There's something that you can actually solve. You want to identify opportunities and then think about your threats. And threats tend to be things that are external. So not as easy for you to solve on your team, but things you need to be mindful of and be made aware of. And I would list out your SPOT analysis. That's a great place to start your reflection. And then you can go into the questions of, hey, what were my goals for 2024? Where am I at? What progress have I made? What is working? What is not working? How do I need to grow as an advisor in the new year? What do I want more of as an advisor in the new year? What do I want less of as an advisor in the new year? Where were some of the times where I was inconsistent, and why was I inconsistent? Why am I off track? I think those and why questions are the more powerful ones, right? So do we start realizing I got off track because, I had a couple clients fall off the books and I lost motivation. Okay, well, we need to have some sort of a process in place so that doesn't happen in the new year. Because if you don't solve that, you're going to be in the same spot you are next year, probably with a higher goal, and you're even more far behind.
Yeah, all right, I've got an interesting, controversial perspective on this to really get your thoughts on it, right? And I'm going to give you both sides of the coin. So there's a school of thought that goes with setting massive short-term goals, right? And set a big goal and try to accomplish it really shortly. Mm-hmm. And then there's another school of thought that says, I'm going to set a goal and I'm going to give myself a really good amount of time to get there, to incrementally get there. So my question is, which school of thought are you? And I definitely got some thoughts on that too.
Yeah, I think that's a great question. And this is such a personal question. And this goes back to understanding your reflection. And if you start understanding what are some of the goals I've accomplished in the past and why did I accomplish them, you'll start to understand, are you more of a set a big goal and run, or set a big goal and give yourself a length of time to achieve it? So I think it's highly individual, Eric. I think it goes back to what motivates you. I know there are some people that will feel paralyzed if they set a really big goal. They just feel paralyzed because they feel so far off track. Whereas there's other people that are like, I'm going to set the biggest goal possible and I'm going to do everything I can to run towards it. I think you have to know what type of person you are. Are you the type of person that if you set a really big goal and you come close, that's still success? Or are you the type of person that if you set a really big goal and come close, that's extreme failure because you didn't hit the goal? And that's where if you go back and you understand what are some of your past goal setting behaviors and tendencies, you'll know a little bit more about yourself.
I think, and I'm going to take a blended approach here. I think there's nothing wrong with becoming successful slowly. In fact, that's the way that most people do it. And I think what happens is if you set really aggressive goals in the short term, you can burn yourself out emotionally because the level of focus, intention, time, mental, emotional, financial, people, resources that have to go into doing that, it can be massive, right? If you end up getting to the point where you go from being a solo advisor to a team, it's not just you that you're thinking about spending emotional gas, right? You're spending other people's emotional gas to hit some goals. So I think there's nothing wrong with going incrementally slow and having planned growth, because I think fast, aggressive growth is disruptive in every aspect of life that's possible. And I mean, I'm talking from personal experience at different points in my career, but experiencing, too fast of growth.
Well, as we were chatting at the start of our conversation before we hit record, sometimes when you have that outsized growth, it stretches all of your systems and processes, and they almost kind of break or come to a screeching halt. And so this takes me back to a conversation I had with my coach a couple years ago, and she asked me and my business, do I want to have sustainable growth? are outsized growth. And there are pros and cons to each one, but my personal choice was I want the sustainable growth because I want to, build and create the systems along the way. But Eric, there are other people that are like, I want that outsized growth and I will deal with the chaos it creates.
For those of you that are listening, I have created the chaos. Don't deal with it. Okay, go sustainable. Okay, go sustainable, and then have a few like breakout years here and there where you grow beyond sustainable. So it's like a little EKG line. You spike it up, you get the hit, and you're good to go. Yeah. So when you think about the work that you do with your clients now, and you think about the current folks that you're coaching with, what are the top like one or two issues or roadblocks that these folks are facing? Like, are there some commonalities that you're seeing, and they can come in different flavors, but what are the commonalities that you're seeing that are challenges or problems as part of your SPOT formula?
So one big conversation that's pretty relevant right now is the direction individuals want to take their practice. And so I think that years ago it was probably pretty simple. There were a lot of solo advisors, but now there's complexity and you can build really big empires and you can build really big teams. And so there's this choice that some advisors are making. Do I want to have a lifestyle practice? Or do I want to build an empire? And I think that creates a lot of push and pull for different advisors. So that's one conversation that I've been having a lot with advisor clients. And then another one, Eric, it really goes back to prospecting and generating leads. And this is true with brand new advisors, individuals who've been in the business for 5 years, 10 years, 18 years. And there always still seems to be a need to have a focus on personalizing your prospecting process and making sure you're getting the right quality referrals that are going to lead you to the clients that you want to serve long term.
Well, it's funny when you talk about this tug between, profitable solo or small team or small ensemble practice versus an empire. For those of you listening, building an empire is not everything that it's cracked up to be. Okay, you think having an empire means substantially more income and profitability if you're running your practice, and I can assure you it does not. It's called the messy middle for a reason, because there's an optimal point when you're going from me to we to an ensemble team, right? Where maybe you're out there listening today and you're growing, you're successful as a solo, so you're like, okay, I'm ready to make my next hire. So you go out and you get somebody to handle your paperwork, because I think that's the next logical thing to do. So because somebody who's handling the paperwork, then you can do, potentially double or triple what you're doing. Great. Then after that, you're like, okay, I'm going to go get me an associate that can help me with my reports and meeting follow-ups and action items. Okay, great. That's probably your next. So that's a 3-person team. I can tell you that a 3-person team that's dialed in could be way more profitable than a 10, 20, or 30 or 40-person team if you guys are listening to this. So don't be fooled. Everything that glimmers is not gold. Okay, I can tell you that. There's, and this is a deeply personal thing when you're thinking about this, coming back to your point. If you want to be an executive and not an advisor, building an enterprise may be for you. If you love the work of being a financial advisor and helping people, and you just want to maybe do 3 or 4 things because those are the things you find exciting as being an advisor, but the other 10 things you don't want to do, well, cool. You can build a whole team where all you do is the 3 things that you love to do, and somebody else does the 10, and you're probably going to be extremely profitable. So it just, I'm addressing that issue, Kristin, because I hear it so much from people that they think that they need to do this. And as somebody that's sitting on the other side of them thinking they need to do it and has done it, like, I can tell you there's things I would have done differently in hindsight.
Eric, I think that's so important you bring it up because we all get bombarded with all these different messages on social media or these visions of success. And I love how you pointed out, do you want to be an advisor or an executive? Because some of my clients who have gotten to that place where they've got 2 or 3 team members, do you know what the next hire they want to make? They want a COO. They want someone who's managing the team because now they've gotten themselves into this place where they've got a team to manage and it's pulling them away from their client work. It's pulling them away from what gives them joy. And that's what they want to hire someone to handle that. And so I think that's really important that people get clear, going back to that vision on what's going to be the most exciting element for you, because there are so many different ways to grow a practice. There's so many different ways to be profitable. And I also think it's important that people will tout their revenue numbers all day long, but they don't usually follow it up with their expenses. So just because you're seeing someone with a big revenue practice or they're doing a ton of assets under management, what are their expenses?
Yeah, that's a biggie, and like this is one that really gets me going. And for those of you out there, stop referring to yourself as CEOs. Okay, I mean, some of y'all need to hear this, so I'm just gonna say it to you straight. Stop referring to yourself. You are not a chief. If you're a solo person, even if you're a small team, you are not a CEO of anything. You are not a chief executive officer. You're not even an executive until you get stuff done through other people. You're not a CEO until there's stuff that goes on in your company and your team that gets handled that you know nothing about. And I challenge anybody here who's got that CEO title, if you know every single thing that goes on in your practice, you're not a CEO. Take the title away. I think the reality of it is that when you talk, if you're a financial advisor and that's the business that you're in and you love helping people and talking about money and helping people make smart decisions around their money, people are not hiring a CEO. They are hiring a personal financial advisor for them, their family, their business, their company, whatever, right? And so that's one of my rants, because every time I go on LinkedIn, I'm like, everybody is a CEO of what? And I'm like, okay, cool. You're a CEO. Got it. It's you and yourself in the mirror, and there's 2 of you there. That's their company. Got it.
Sure. Yeah.
I don't know. I think there's a lot of, like you talked about, this whole pull towards things, right?
Mm-hmm.
Whether it's you see somebody doing a lot of revenue, or you see somebody buying a expensive car, or you see somebody like, you don't really know what that person's personal financial picture looks like.
Sure.
And I think that's just interesting in general.
Yeah. Yeah. We just always don't know the other side of the story. And that's come up so many times for me, Eric, right? I've compared myself to other coaches, and then I chat with someone who was a former client of the coach, and I'm like, whoa, I didn't know that was really what was going on behind the scenes. Or I used to think I wanted to lead a financial services office. I thought I wanted to be a leader. And then I learn, really, now that I coach some of those leaders, what's going on behind the scenes. And I'm like, oh, I'm in the right place. And so we often do that to ourselves. We're like, I want that, whether it's the recognition, the glitz, the glamour. And then until we get closer and figure out what that is, we can sometimes be mistaken.
So kind of coming back into like what we were talking about with regards to goal alignment, to vision, and the things that we need to be doing to move ourselves forward. As we're approaching towards the year end, I've been pondering this one.
Okay.
When is the ideal time to do next year's visioning and goal planning?
Yes. So the ideal time is really in Q4. And I think it's such a blend, because right now we've got the desire to finish the year strong with the excitement of the potential for the new year. And so I really recommend that you do this over the series of a couple of different sessions, that you don't have to just sit down and like bang it all out in one session, because there is some power in doing this in phases. Because I don't know if you ever find this, Eric, when you start thinking about something for your business and then you walk away and maybe you go work out or you go, to a practice with your kids, you get another idea. So there is like a little bit of power in giving yourself some space. But I typically start taking my clients through this process in November so we can get through all of the phases before the end of the year. So they really start the new year off strong.
I like November just because of the word, right? November helps you say no to everything in the next year so that you can say yes to the right things. That's why it really is called November.
Yeah, hey, that's a great perspective.
Right?
And there's also the focus on gratitude, and so you can be thankful about where you're at and the results you've generated so far and the individuals you get to serve. There's an element of gratitude in this work, I think, as well.
Yeah, I agree with you. It's funny how not intentionally, but my brain every year after for close to 20 years now, right after Halloween, my brain just starts shifting that direction, right, towards gratitude. Maybe it's because upcoming holidays of Thanksgiving and Christmas and all this family time, right, which puts me in a different headspace. But I always find that that's the time of the year when I'm looking for books and insights to kind of infuse my thought processes as I go into the next year's set of planning. Like,
Sure.
okay, this year is mostly done. Where am I? Where am I? Who did I become, and who am I becoming? And am I happy with that? Right? And I think a lot of folks that are listening to this, right, when you think about visioning, whenever you say visioning, your brain is going to goals and monetary goals and lifestyle and purchases of stuff. But, I can tell you once you get past those levels, it's really about how you're living and what sort of sense of personal happiness do you have, right? Money's a vehicle to get there. So I'm just curious of what your thoughts are on that.
Well, it's interesting. I think that it can change over time as well. So if you were to ask me my thoughts when I first started my coaching business, I was like, I'm going to build an empire. And now that I've gotten into it, I have a lot of joy and happiness walking with my daughter to school or playing golf with my husband on Fridays and having, time with my family and friends on the weekends. And so I start thinking about it and I'm like, well, what it takes to build that empire isn't going to generate the level of happiness that I want right now. I actually read a really fascinating book recently. It's called All It Takes is a Goal. And I had to pick up this book, right? I was at the airport traveling for business. I'm like, well, I'm a goal achievement coach. This is a book on goals. I should probably read it. And I loved it. And the author has a really great exercise for anyone that's struggling with a vision. And he encourages everyone to do a best moments list. So literally to write out all the best moments of your life. And the rule is there's no best moment that's too small, but you go through and you just document all these best moments. And then Eric, he says that they fall typically in 4 categories. 1 is an experience. 2 is an achievement. 3 is a relationship, so they involved other people made it the best moment. Or 4 is an object. And if you go through and you look at your best moments, your vision becomes, how do I get more of those best moments? And so I think that would be really eye-opening for a lot of individuals right now that think about revenue or money in terms of their vision. I would challenge you to go back and do your best moments list, and you might really be surprised at what actually shows up as best moments in your life.
So I'm curious, what sort of examples did the author give around objects?
Okay. No, this is a great question. And I'll actually just give some of my personal, right? Because I did it. So I'm a big believer. You got to strike while the iron is hot. So I go to a bookstore, I grab a journal, and I was doing it at dinner one night. And it was such a cool story because I'm on this business trip and I'm like feverishly writing in this journal at dinner.
You're in flow state, as we call it.
Yes. And the guy next to me looks at me and he's like, wow, I've never seen someone write so much. And I strike up a conversation. It happened to be the mayor of the city I was in, which was really cool. But some of the objects that showed up on my list were when I bought myself a Louis Vuitton, and I bought it when I was in Vegas at the Bellagio Hotel when I hit my campus recruiting goals. This is years ago, right? This is like
Yep.
over a decade ago, but it was less about the actual purse and it was more about what it represented. So sometimes that's what the objects, they show up on your list because you did something or you became someone to get that object. The author gave an example. Maybe it was like your grandfather's watch is something that was like a best moment. And so it's usually not like some of you just run out to the store and buy, but there's something associated with that object.
I love that. Got it. I was thinking about things, right? But I totally understand. It's like, one of my favorite authors of all time was a goal setting guy named Brian Tracy. And Brian Tracy says, set a goal to make $1 million, not for the money, but for the person that you have to become worthy of
Sure.
$1 million, right? What sort of value do you need to deliver to folks? What sort of service? How do you need to conduct yourself? How do you need to manage your time? How do you need to construct the weeks and the months and the quarters and the years, right? And so it's just, I love that. It kind of ties into what you're saying around like, hey, when you hit this target, this is what it means to you. And
Right.
even though to some people on the surface, right, these things could appear as like dumb, it's not. There's something that like makes this thing a reward. It makes me think about from a lot of people here. I'm sure that they set fitness goals for 2024 when they were in November of 2023, right? And maybe some of you can relate to this. And somebody told this to me, and it'll make you laugh. But it was like if you work out and you do something physical, don't reward yourself with eating junk. You're not a dog.
Yeah.
You need a treat. So I think your methodology of like tying a goal to an object, that's something that signified that, so that every time that you would touch that and look at that LV, you'd be
Yeah.
like, look at the early mornings, the late nights when I stayed after 5 p.m. when I gave this
Yep.
up to do that, what it symbolized to you.
Exactly.
I love that. So an experience, an achievement, a relationship, or an object. So
Or an
all that
object.
it takes is a goal. So that's fantastic. So is there anything that else that you would leave the folks that are listening to us with as they're thinking about it's the end of the year and I've got maybe a quarter left to change the trajectory of my practice? Is there anything that they should be thinking about right now or they should be thinking about as they prepare for 2025?
So, right now, I would encourage all of our listeners to define what it means to finish strong. So, as you think about these next few months of 2024, what does finishing the year strong mean to you? And it's going to look different for everyone who is listening, but it gives you a chance to reset if needed. So, if you're wildly off track from what you wanted in 2024, don't just throw away these next couple of months. Like reset, refocus. What does finish the year strong mean? Because as we all know, the work you do this quarter is what is going to show up in terms of revenue and sales and assets at the beginning of the year. So don't throw this quarter away just because you might not be on track for what you originally wanted. And if you are on track, really tune into what is working and then figure out what it means to finish strong for you. Are you going to double down? Do you want to go even further? So I think just asking that question, what does finishing 2024 strong mean to me, would be a really powerful takeaway for all of our listeners.
Phenomenal. Well, thank you so much, Kristin, for your amazing insights. You hit us with the 4 C's. You gave us an amazing book recommendation. You gave us a phenomenal framework around goals, especially around mindset. You talked about key habits that successful advisors utilize when they're setting goals and executing. You talked about the traps of let's call it lifestyle versus enterprise and what that really means. And this was super insightful. So thank you so much for joining us. And for our listeners out there, we really, really appreciate you. We're looking forward to our upcoming episodes. Please share. If you found this insightful, please share this with somebody that you think needs to hear this. And please take a moment and do the exercise that Kristin just said about what does finishing 2024 strong mean to you. So thank you so much.
Thanks, Eric.